Hello, my fellow gamers. This is Macho here, and today we're back with another rambling video. And what is in this rambling video, you might ask? Well, for once, I don't know. I did not think of this beforehand. But you see, sometimes we get bored. What happens when we get bored? Why? We make videos on the internet. And why do we make videos on the internet? Well, you see, we make videos on the internet because that is the right thing to do. And why is it the right thing to do? Well, you see, doing the right thing is something that we are always told to do. But why are we told to do that? Why? It's because society demands that. And speaking of society, we live in a society. So says the Joker. And speaking of the Joker, reminds me of my very particular character of Joker Man, aka Mr. I seen a man turn himself into a pickle kind of Joker Man. But why was he watching a man turn himself into a pickle? Well, you see, Joker Man liked outdated memes. Is that perhaps part of the Joker Man lore? Is there a Joker Man lore? Why, nobody knows. Or maybe perhaps even Fanto knows. Is Fanto know? Or is he the type of Fanto who knows? And what kind of knows does he know? Nobody knows. But speaking of which, there are doggos in the background barking. And why are doggos in the background barking? Because that's what doggos do. But this is a big but. Speaking of big butts, it's like that one song where someone likes big butts and they cannot lie. But much like big butlers, they're just like maids and they don't get paid. That's why they're stuck with this stinking job. That was an old joke from way back in the day. The type of back in the day that makes me sound old. For you see, just like the good old days, and back in my day, I used to make a lot of inside jokes. Light of inside jokes. Well, with Zach Servo, and, well, and my old friend Pyromancer. But, alas, he has changed his name. But he is still my friend. Don't get the wrong idea now, you hear. For you hear what you want to hear. Or perhaps you hear that which is not heard. Much like the sound of silence. Hello, darkness, my old friend. And much like darkness, it reminds me of a very particular Crusader character from Konosuba. Why do I bring up Konosuba? Well, if it wasn't obvious, based on that poster in the background, Macho is kind of a weeb. But why is he a weeb? It's because he likes anime. Then why does he like anime? For you see, perhaps maybe he enjoys the medium of entertainment. Because, for you see, a lot can be done through anime. But not to get sidetracked by any means. For you see, when you get sidetracked, you start tripping over your own feet. And why would you trip over your own feet? Because perhaps like me, you're blind. And in a way, I am the reverse John Cena. For you see, it's not that you can't see me. It's that I can't see you. And I would be wearing my glasses anyway, but alas, the glare would shine off this computer screen and you would not be able to see me. So maybe in a way that kinda does make me like John Cena. But that is beside the point. because there's to be no banner dance here. Yes, and I know that was very tone deaf. Tone deaf, almost like a very specific quirk from Darkest Dungeon. What does this quirk of being tone deaf do in Darkest Dungeon? Well, you see, you take less stress healing from the jester, Mr. Clown Man himself, or as his real name is, Sarmenti. Why is he called Sarmenti? Perhaps maybe he was named after a real-life jester. Or perhaps maybe it is just a name that they chose from someone IRL in the staff room. Yes, for you see, it is Red Hook that made Darkest Dungeon. And I must say it is one of my favorite games. It is very addicting, but also very difficult. And why is it so difficult? For you see, in my honest opinion, it is like the Dark Souls of turn-based RPGs. Not be confused with Fear and Hunger. For you see, with Fear and Hunger, that is like the Dark Souls of dungeon crawling. They are also two different games. Very similar in tone and lore, especially on being messed up, but... And once again, this is a big but. One of them is way more messed up, and also is way more unforgiving. For you see, in Darkest Dungeon, you get stressed out. You die. You lose your heroes permanently. In Fear and Hunger, a lot of other stuff happens. Stuff that I will not mention. But if you know, you know. But not to get distracted anymore. For you see, getting distracted leads one to getting ambushed. And why would you get ambushed? Well, for you see, just like in Darkest Dungeon, if you don't have all your lights on, you might, not know when someone's coming. But alas, I have all my lights on, so it is safe. Especially because there is no natural light in here, and there is no light switches, only my two lamps. Like that one right there. Yes, for you see, it is the light that is the promise of safety. That is what the ancestor taught everyone. But the ancestor also did a lot of things. Yes, and just like the ancestor, there was people that came before us. And why did they come before us? Because that's how history works. And how does history work? I don't know. I didn't think I'd get this far. I wasn't exactly the greatest of history growing up. Of course not. No, for you see, I was really bad at doing that. I was not good at taking history tests either. But that is okay. For that is life. And what is life but a game? Yes, just like that Danganronpa fanfiction that I occasionally work on. Danganronpa Life is a game. It is of course my own killing game, with my own cast of students, and so far, I've already completed a chapter. And why am I writing an entire killing game of Danganronpa? Well, for you see, I don't know how to code a game. I don't have that expertise yet. Maybe someday I could, if I actually decide to sit down and learn it. But from what I've heard, coding is a very hard thing to do. But perhaps maybe if I really dedicate myself, I could potentially make it an actual game. But for now it is but a story. But that is more my expertise. Yes, for you see, I've been writing for a very long time. But I will not get into detail, lest that perhaps instead be used for another rambling video, in which you, the viewer, will probably be stuck there for hours listening to me ramble about lore from multiple universes. And not just my own universes, no. Perhaps maybe the lore of games, if you really wanted to hear me ramble about things like that. But yes, even in the darkness, speaking of getting ambushed, there are foxes back there. For you see, Macho really likes foxes. And why does Macho like foxes? Well, it's because they're good. Why does Macho like foxes? Well, for you see, he thinks that they're really good creatures. If that doesn't sound weird, that does sound weird. But that is beside the point. He really likes foxes. They are very funny creatures. But, this once again is a big but. He, I don't know, he does something. He doesn't know what he does. But anyway, on to the next subject. On my desk, there sits this little Monokuma. It is a good Monokuma. The kind of Monokuma that goes oop 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 oop. But why does he go oop 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 oop? For you see, that is how he laughs in Japanese. Much like his late voice actor, the same one that voiced Doraemon. May she rest in peace. Yes, but for you see, her voicing Doraemon before Monokuma is ironic. Because in a way, that would be like the equivalent of American Monokuma being voiced by Winnie the Pooh. Or, but yes, that is how it all starts. And how do things start? Well, first, they need an end. It is like a serpent eating its own tail. What must start must always end. Unlike the Stanley Parable, as they always say, the end is never the end is never the end is never the end. Yes, that is a complete, ongoing contradiction there. For you see, the end is never the end. But the end is not the beginning either. For the beginning only begins with the end. And speaking of the end, it's like the final world in Minecraft. I have only once ever reached the end, but that was only with a party of friends. And I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, we were playing modded. But it was still an interesting experience, finally being able to see the end. But perhaps maybe someday in vanilla, I could actually see the end. But alas, before I could even do that, I must first survive past iron. For you see, Macho dies pretty often in Minecraft. And why does he die pretty often in Minecraft? It's because he's kind of an incompetent at the game. Or rather, he's almost Mr. Accident Prone. As soon as he starts getting ironed, he almost dies within the next 5 minutes. Yes, sir, that is how it works. But, you know what else works? Well, not Squidward, of course. Because in that one episode, he didn't have a job. It's like whenever he took Mr. Krabs' dime. Or supposedly he took his dime. His million dime. No, that's $1. What is $1? $1 is another way of saying dollar, but Macho, for some reason, keeps leaving off the R's. Maybe because he's not a pirate. He's not like the Straw Hats. Or you see, unlike the Straw Hats, Macho is not trying to look for the One Piece. Rather, instead, he is trying to figure out on how they're going to find the One Piece. But at least we do know that the One Piece is real. That is the truth. And that is what drives Macho to keep rambling. But why does he keep rambling? For you see, Macho had nothing better to do than to boot up his computer and make a video after about a year or so. And the last time, this was another rambling video, and the time before that. Is Macho running out of ideas? It is a possibility. But maybe in the future there might be more if Macho actually had the motivation to do it. But there was ideas that Macho does have. Such as, for example, possibly making more skits for Machoverse 4. Or maybe even, if he was really daring, making an entire video of JoJo poses. But for now, that is all I must ramble at you for. And so, as I always say, stay in the game inside, my friends. This much Gator. Sign out till next time.